So there has been some contradictory reports and signs about exactly China's positioning in all of this. So let's take you through all of those. Let's go ahead and put this first New York Times piece up on the screen, which is they're reporting, and again, this is based on a Western intelligence report, and we don't have the evidence, so keep all of those grains of salt in mind. But they're reporting that China basically had a heads up before this invasion and kind of gave the okay as long as the Russians waited until after the Olympics.
Yes.
And that, of course, is exactly when the invasion actually happened. And it's funny because I was talking to a friend of mine who works for the government last week, who's just a regular like civilian dude, and he's like, I called this date because I knew they wouldn't do it while the Chinese Olympics in China
we were making fun of
going
that
on
at the time, but it actually seems to be a real thing.
I think it may have been actually legit. I mean, and that brings China into kind of a level of complicity and makes some of their actions after the fact make sense. The fact that they've helped to bolster the Russian wheat market. Let's put the next element up on the screen. There's a UN Security Council. There was a UN General Assembly vote, and one of the countries that continues to abstain is China. Now, I guess that's better than them, voting against the resolution to condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but they're trying to keep hands off. However, their very latest comments from China sort of signal a bit of a shift potentially in how they're viewing all of this, because I think they also have to feel like Putin, this isn't going exactly the way that they expected it would go. The Western countries are more unified. There's been more consequences to bear on Russia. The military campaign itself is not going all that well. So let's put this next piece up on the screen. China is signaling that they are ready to play a role in finding a ceasefire in Ukraine. And this is the strong language here. This is the strongest they've used. They deplored, quote, the outbreak of conflict. Those are their strongest comments yet on Russia's invasion. And of course, this really matters. They also said that they were extremely concerned about the harm to civilians that came after a phone call between the Chinese foreign minister and their Ukrainian counterpart. So there are conversations that are happening back and forth here. They also added they respected the territorial integrity of all countries without directly indicating whether Beijing accepted Russia's claim to the Crimean Peninsula or shared its recognition of separatists in the Donbas region of eastern Ukraine. So there seems to be a bit of a tonal shift here. And it matters, obviously, massively, because China is Russia's biggest ally in this fight. In terms of the geopolitics, part of what this looked like going in is this sort of realignment of Russia allied with China, with the West on the other side. And so any signs of a sort of schism in how China is approaching this and thinking about this, well, they're the ones who are really in position to put a lot of pressure on Russia. There's one more piece that may give some insight into why they feel like this is not furthering their interest. If you're the Chinese, this is from Foreign Policy. Our producer James found this piece. Putin's war has killed China's Eurasian railway dreams. Yep. So a key part of the Belt and Road Initiative is something they've dubbed the Iron Silk Road. This is a railway corridor that crosses all of Eurasia, runs through Kazakhstan, Russia, and Belarus. And effectively, if you have this railway going through all of these countries, they could be massively impacted by European sanctions on Russia, because almost half of the routes in this initiative, which is really, again, a sort of key priority, which has been held up and, really used as propaganda with the Chinese population as well, half of those routes pass through Russia. So they have their own financial and strategic considerations here that they feel like are maybe this whole Russia invading Ukraine thing is not going the way that they also had wanted it to go.
Yeah, it's very important that you put it that way. The Belt and Road Initiative is central to the Communist parties staying in power and selling the economic vision to the Chinese people. So when you look at this, what you see is a catastrophe for the Chinese to lose even a part of that. Then geopolitically, for them to be aligned with Russia in this way, it's a huge problem, because if you think Russia getting cut off from the global financial system is bad, imagine China getting cut off from the global financial system. I doubt many of these companies and others would be willing to do that, given how much of the size of the market actually is. Yeah, that would cause them to really have to choose about what's happening. That being said, even a 10% drop would be catastrophe for the Chinese economy and for the entire global financial system. So when they're looking at what's happening with Russia, they have to play this very, very hard diplomatically, because obviously they can't abandon the Russians, but abstaining in the Security Council on their behalf with Iraq, India, and I forget what the other country was, that went ahead and did so, that was a big gesture because they combined that with that statement deploring the outbreak of the conflict, which obviously you can read both ways. But in terms of the actual relations between Moscow and Beijing in this, I think it's no question that Beijing obviously wanted Russia not to do this until after the Olympics, but has also looked at this with great alarm. Beijing has long believed that they can pursue kind of strategic autonomy in terms of what they get to do in their country, and that the West would mostly frown, but they could get away with whatever they want. And I mean, they're mostly correct with that. And it has been true. But when they saw what happened in terms of the global backlash to Ukraine, and this is why there's a lot of takes out there like, oh, I think China is going to move on Taiwan. I actually think this sets that back significantly. I would say it reduces the likelihood. If you're watching the geopolitical cancellation, quote unquote, of all of Russia, if you're China, you're 10 times more vulnerable to that. And if you have even 20-something% of that backlash, that will crater your entire domestic economy. And if you think the Russian oligarchs are reliant on outside banks and all that, wait until you meet the Chinese oligarchs. These people are probably 10 times shadier, more corrupt, and have a lot more to lose, and are in themselves also an important power broker within that country. So I think what we're watching with the global financial system cutting off Russia, the kind of cultural pushback, is something Beijing cannot risk and actually needs to not happen for their economic expansion goals. A key part of, for example, the Belt and Road Initiative and their Made in China 2025 plan is the ability to import massive amounts of natural gas and oil. Well, what's the easiest thing to cut off? Well, it's energy resources. The same thing whenever it comes to their trading routes. Part of the whole reason they even want Taiwan and the Taiwan Straits in the first place is to control the rules of the game for 40-something% of the world shipping. Same in the Straits of Malacca and all of their ability to project power in the sea. This is what it all comes down to, global trade. And if they get cut off from the trading system, they're screwed. I mean, they truly will crater, and a lot of their power and ability to project power is gone. The way that they look at soft power is the same thing in terms of Africa and a lot of the deals that they have in terms of financing all of this. They're not even close to being able to have a truly autarkic system in China. So I would look at this and I would say what's happening is a catastrophe. There's going to actually be, and probably will invite, diplomatic backlash on Beijing, specifically because of what has happened here. Combine that with the entire world rightfully blames them for not lying about COVID in the beginning, and you have a big problem on your hands. I mean, the Pew Research polling shows that favorable views of China fell like 50-some% across the entire world, East and West, after COVID. Combine that with this, they're now on par with Russia. Not as much of a pariah state, but very much have the, in terms of domestic political will to cut them off, it exists if they do something in Taiwan.
Yeah, and so the reason this is so incredibly critical is because they are the people who could really put pressure on.
Yeah, and they are.
Yes,
from what
and
it looks like.
It seems like they are. Again, you always want to take these things with a grain of salt, but if they are truly shifting, hopefully that could force Putin to look for an off-ramp here instead of looking to continue to escalate, looking at other, potential areas that he would want to expand into. That's the hope. And, again, there are diplomatic talks that are happening today. I don't think anybody expects much to come out of that. But somebody has to move off of their current positions if you're going to have any resolution to this conflict in anything approaching the near term. And if China can bring pressure to bear on Russia, that would be a tiny sliver of hope that you could see an opening there. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut, our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it, you get to ask us questions, all that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.